Hi, my name is Jonathan Small. I'm the Executive Vice President for the Oklahoma Council of Public Affairs. We are the state's free market think tank that represents Oklahoma and hopes that policy would be passed that would help them unleash their human potential. This is why this issue is extremely important to us. Also, I am a certified public accountant, and I'm very familiar with the state and revenue process. I've worked for both Democrat and Republican administrations, starting out in the Brad Henry administration and then serving in the House in partnership with them when they passed the historic tax cuts that were signed and advocated for by former Governor Brad Henry. What's important to note is that there is no greater case for the fact that both Democrats and Republicans believe that State Question 640 did not apply to tax cuts by the very fact that, for instance, in 1998, in House Bill 3152, a Democrat-controlled legislature passed measures that provided sales tax relief for poor Oklahomans and a personal income tax cut of 0.25%. It's also important to note that if the Supreme Court rules that State Question 640 applies to tax cuts, it subjects dozens of provisions of tax relief that will affect many. Disabled veterans could see an annual tax hike of $500 or more. The surviving spouse of a member of the armed forces killed in action could see their annual taxes hike as well. Active military personnel could see annual tax hikes. Senior citizens and retirees could see annual tax hikes of $1,000 or more based on the removal of retiree tax relief that was passed. Middle-class families in Oklahoma, take a family that has a social worker and a teacher that are spouses that are serving Oklahomans. They could see their annual personal income taxes increase by $900 or more from the removal of tax relief that was passed in 2005 and 2006. Single moms, a single mom with 2 children, could see her personal income taxes increase by $200 because of the same test that would have to be used if the Supreme Court ruled that State Question 640 now applies to tax cuts. And one of the most important groups is farmers in Oklahoma. As you know, many farmers are required to have large tracts of land in order to produce the agricultural needs and the food that we eat here in Oklahoma and across the nation. That requires for you to have large property. Can you imagine if you're a farmer today in Oklahoma and you now have to pay an estate tax? A typical farm that would be able to survive in Oklahoma today would now be liable for an estate tax of over $400,000. It's also important to note that such a decision could result in opening up other lawsuits. The legislature has allocated dedicated funds from the personal income tax to a number of different sources and entities for government. Previously, entities like that have been successful in suing both the government and others when they have taken revenue from them that a decision has allowed for that. Take, for example, the teachers' retirement system. It receives a dedicated portion of both income taxes and corporate income taxes. Provisions that adjusted those measures were passed, and providing tax relief were passed in bills that violated State Question 640. The teachers' retirement could assert that because of the tax cut, they've been deprived of investment revenue and can sue the state and taxpayers for $1 billion in tax pay. I think it's important to remember a host of the tax relief that was passed. In 1998, a reduction from 7 to 6.75%. Remember, in Oklahoma, our top rate applies to those with low income. Our 5.25% right now applies to married couples of $15,000 a year and singles at barely $8,700 a year, hardly the wealthy. In 2005, reductions in the personal income tax were from 6.65% to 6.25%. In 2006, there's the reductions that brought it from 6.25 to the current 5.25 we have today. It could mean repeal of the Oklahoma's estate tax, repeal of tax relief for disabled veterans who file personal income tax return. It would repeal and end the tying of our state's standard deduction to the federal deduction, increasing by thousands of dollars per year the taxable income of Oklahomans. It would also result in and removing tax relief for retirees, but in specifically those that are in the private sector. For years, the Oklahoma tax code had an unfair advantage where if you were in government in retirement, regardless of how much you made, you received a higher benefit. But if you got your pension from an annuity or some other revenues, you did not have that option. Oklahomans believed, and they employed a bipartisan legislature to pass tax cuts for all retirees. Those would be subject as well. Aerospace engineers. Oklahoma is competing for the aerospace industry according to local chambers. The aerospace tax credit was passed in a manner that violated State Question 640. In fact, the most recent extension of the aerospace tax credit originated in the Senate. Therefore, it would violate State Question 640. That means that aerospace engineers that chose Oklahoma over no income tax states could now see their personal income tax liability increase by more than $5,000 per year. It is clear that applying such an onerous and ridiculous requirement that raise somehow now means to collect would actually end up increasing and generating $1 billion tax increase over all Oklahomans when you consider all the provisions that apply today.